The fairgrounds of Willow Brook shimmered beneath the full moon's ganister glow. Caspian Blackwood strolled along the cobblestone path, the scent of caramel apples and spun sugar thick in the air. His green eyes darted from one booth to the next, but his thoughts lingered on the witch's tent ahead. Morgana Wraith, the local enigma, had caught his attention with her otherworldly aura and unnerving accuracy in her predictions. Caspian hesitated at the entrance, the palms of his hands clammy with a mix of intrigue and trepidation. He had always been drawn to the supernatural, ever since that fateful night when a witch's curse had seared its way into his memory. But Morgana was different. There was something about her that made him question his very existence. Steeling his resolve, he ducked inside the dimly lit tent. The air inside was heavy with the scent of incense. Eyes adjusting to the flickering candlelight, Morgana sat before a small round table, her raven hair cascading over her shoulders like a midnight waterfall. Her violet eyes seemed to penetrate his very soul, as if she knew his innermost desires and fears. "Come, Caspian Blackwood," she purred, her voice like a siren's song. "Sit, and I will show you what awaits you." Caspian complied, taking a seat across from her, unable to tear his gaze away from her enchanting eyes. Morgana's eyes drifted shut, her long-fingered hands hovering over a crystal ball that swirled with inky darkness. "I see a life plagued by questions, and a longing for something more," she said, her voice airy and ethereal. Caspian's heart pounded in his chest, as if her words were extracted from his innermost thoughts. "You will uncover secrets better left buried, and a power within you that will both enthrall and terrify you," she continued, her eyes flickering open. "But your fate, Caspian Blackwood, will not be decided by me. No, it seems. It is entwined with another." Caspian leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. Who, he managed to ask, his voice hoarse with anticipation. Morgana's lips curved into a secretive smile, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "That, my dear Caspian, is for you to discover in an instant." It was over. Caspian blinked, and he was back in the bustling fairgrounds, Morgana's haunting words echoing in his head. He knew then that his life would never be the same again. Fate, destiny, and the supernatural were no longer merely stories to be told around the fire. He felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that whatever lay ahead, it would be far more chilling and enthralling than any novel he'd ever penned. And so Caspian Blackwood left the carnival that night, forever changed. The revelation of his impending doom weighing heavy on his mind, but beneath the dread, a flicker of anticipation stirred. For the first time in years, he felt alive, and he was determined to unravel the mystery of his destiny and find the enigmatic woman in his vision, no matter the cost. Morgana watched Caspian leave, her fingertips absently stroking the now clouded crystal ball. For a moment, she allowed herself a small, wistful smile. To think that this brooding, tortured man would be her downfall. Her life, thus far, had been a series of seemingly endless days spent toying with the hearts of mortals, granting them fleeting glimpses of the future for her own amusement. Yet after her encounter with Caspian Blackwood, she found herself longing for something more. Slowly she stood, her voluminous skirts rustling like autumn leaves in the breeze. She gathered the stray tarot cards and returned them to the deck, her movements methodical, almost meditative. His words echoed in her mind, "I will find you." A chill raced down her spine, raising gooseflesh on her arms. Morgana knew, with a sickening certainty, that Caspian Blackwood would be true to his word. And when he did, when their paths crossed once more, she would not be able to resist him. The flames of her scrying fire danced higher, reflecting her inner turmoil. Fate and destiny, it seemed, were intertwined like the twisted branches of an accursed tree, and she, Morgana the all-knowing, found herself powerless to sever the entangled limbs. With a sigh, she extinguished the fire, plunging the tent into darkness. The fates, it seemed, had already sealed both their destinies. I couldn't shake the image of Morgana Wraith and her haunting words from our encounter in the graveyard. The more I tried to push her from my mind, the more she haunted my thoughts. Determined to unravel the mystery surrounding her and the unsettling vision she'd shown me, I set out to discover the truth behind her enigmatic nature. My research led me to the doorstep of Agnes Larkspur, an elderly woman with a reputation for knowing more about the supernatural forces at play in Willow Brook than anyone else. Agnes was a formidable sight, with her gnarled fingers clutching a smoking pipe and her sharp blue eyes twinkling with an otherworldly intelligence. She agreed to help me, sensing my desperation and the weight of Morgana's prophecy that bore down on my soul. Under her guidance, I delved into the world of witchcraft and magic, a world I'd always believed existed only in the pages of my novels. We pored over dusty tomes and crumbling parchments, unearthing the dark history of our seemingly quaint town. Willow Brook, it seemed, had a long-buried secret, a coven of witches dating back centuries ago. Morgana Wraith, I learned, was the last surviving member of this coven, her youth and beauty maintained by forbidden arts. Her coven's history was marred by tragedy and bloodshed, the townspeople having turned against them in a frenzy of witch hysteria. All but Morgana had perished, and she'd vowed revenge on the town that had wronged her kin. As the days turned into weeks, my lessons with Agnes intensified. I honed my skills in both magic and combat, for I knew that a confrontation with Morgana was inevitable. Agnes prepared potions and enchanted talismans to aid me in my quest, but in the end, she said, the fight would be mine alone. Finally, the day arrived. The air hung thick with a palpable sense of dread as Caspian and Agnes stalked the dimly lit alleyways of the seemingly sleepy town. They knew they were getting closer to unraveling the truth behind Morgana's centuries-long presence and her sinister dealings. Tonight, they'd received a tip-off about a meeting between a lesser witch and some unsuspecting victims. Caspian's heart pounded in his chest, his senses on high alert, while Agnes gripped her silver dagger tightly, her determination palpable. Rounding a corner, they spotted a hooded figure in the flickering lamplight, standing over a terrified couple, their faces etched with fear. Caspian and Agnes exchanged a brief glance before launching into action. Agnes rushed at the hooded figure, her dagger glinting in the moonlight, while Caspian brandished a crude wooden cross he'd crayed earlier that day. The hooded witch cackled as she revealed herself, her once youthful face contorting into a grotesque parody of age and rot. Fools. You think you can stop the likes of me, she cackled manically, her voice raspy and otherworldly. The couple cowered on the ground, whimpering in terror. Agnes plunged her dagger into the witch's chest, but to their horror, it passed right through her insubstantial form. Caspian, his resolve wavering, held up his crude cross. The witch shrieked in agony, her form dissipating into a cloud of black smoke. As the smoke cleared, Caspian turned to Agnes, relief and adrenaline coursing through him. But before he could speak, the unthinkable happened. Morgana's power had taken root in his mind, her whispers raising doubts about Agnes's true intentions. Caspian, she purred in his head, her voice as sweet as honey and as poisonous as hemlock. Can you trust her, really? How do you know she isn't in league with me? Caspian's once trusting emerald eyes hardened as he took in Agnes's flushed face and heaving chest, her dagger stained with the witch's foul blood. What are you hiding from me? Agnes's voice was cold, his words laced with an accusation that tasted like bile. Agnes's eyes widened in disbelief and hurt. Caspian, he cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand, leaving the couple behind to fend for themselves. I don't want to hear your lies, witch, he spat, the venom in his voice coating each syllable. He stalked off into the night, turning his back on her and their budding partnership. Morgana cackled to herself, her laughter echoing in the night air as she watched them through the eyes of a nearby raven. This is just the beginning, Agnes, she cackled, delighted with the seeds of suspicion she had planted in Caspian's heart. This is just the start of your suffering. The moon cast a pale glow over the graveyard, the air thick with an unnatural chill. I, Caspian Blackwood, stood among the crooked headstones, the damp earth oozing with secrets long buried. The night was as quiet as the dead around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Agnes had insisted on meeting here, claiming to have uncovered something that could change everything I paced before the ancient crypt, the one she had specified in her cryptic note. The wind howled through the leafless branches of the yew trees, their twisted limbs reaching out like skeletal fingers. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I didn't trust her, not after our last encounter, but I needed answers. The witch's prophecy haunted me, and if there was a chance to undo it, I had to try. Suddenly, a shimmering form materialized in front of me, coalescing into the ethereal beauty of Morgana Wraith. Caspian, I've been expecting you. She purred, her voice like silk and poison. Stay back, witch, I warned, clenching the crude wooden stake Agnes had given me. It felt feeble against her otherworldly power, but it was all I had. Morgana laughed and flicked her wrist. A cloying mist rose from the ground, twisting around my ankles and wrists, binding me in its cold embrace. You've brought our little game right to me, Caspian. How convenient. Let him go, Agnes's voice rang out, and she emerged from the shadows, brandishing a glowing amulet. Morgana hissed, her beautiful face contorting into something monstrous. Traitor, she spat at Agnes, and the air crackled with malevolent energy. I've had enough of your games, Morgana, Agnes shouted, rushing forward. The amulet blazed brighter, but Morgana cackled, flinging bolts of dark energy at her. Agnes stumbled, but she didn't falter. Run, Caspian, she yelled, and in that moment, I knew the depth of her betrayal had been a ruse. In an act of defiance, I struggled against my bonds, willing them to break. They snapped, and I lunged for the stake. I plunged it into Morgana's back, just as she readied a final blow at Agnes. Morgana screamed, her form dissipating into the night air, wounded but not dead. Go, Agnes gasped, blood pooling on her blouse. Her sacrifice had bought me time, and I didn't intend to waste it. With renewed determination, I fled into the night, clutching the amulet and the stake, my heart heavy with grief and newfound purpose. Vengeance for Agnes, and an end to the vampire Morgana. Caspian Blackwood stood before the enchanting Morgana Wraith, his heart heavy with grief over Agnes's sacrifice. The elderly woman had given her life to save those she loved, empowering him with the artifact that now pulsed with energy in his hand. He raised it, the air around them crackling with supernatural tension. Morgana's eyes widened, her usual air of confidence faltering. Caspian saw his opportunity and lunged forward, plunging the artifact into her chest. She screamed, her body convulsing as the artifact stole her dark power. Caspian felt a searing pain tear through him. Their connection severed as Morgana's hold on him was broken. His vision blurred, but he refused to relent. He twisted the artifact, channeling every ounce of his remaining strength into weakening her. Morgana's form shuddered, her ethereal beauty fading before his eyes. In her place stood a frail, aged woman whose enigmatic aura had vanished. Her once violet eyes dulled as she crumpled to the ground. Caspian dropped to his knees, the weight of his actions bearing down upon him. The room around them crumbled, the illusion of her lair fading away. He stared at his trembling hands, bloodied from the battle. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them away. Agnes's sacrifice and the loss of his childhood sanctuary steeled his resolve. He couldn't afford to break down now. There would be time for that later. Slowly, he rose to his feet, tucking the artifact into his jacket. The people of Willowbrook would never know the extent of the danger he had averted, but he knew. And he knew he would carry the weight of this responsibility for the rest of his days. He left the crumbling remnants of Morgana's lair, emerging into the cold, damp night. The full moon illuminated the graveyard, casting eerie shadows across the tombstones. A raven cawed in the distance, as if bidding him farewell. Caspian trudged home, his steps heavy with the knowledge that, while he had vanquished one evil, there were more lurking in the shadows, waiting for their turn. He was done running. Tonight, Caspian Nightshade, once an innocent orphan, had become something more, the keeper of the artifact.